everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you might be joining us from in the world today. My name is Meg Alexander. I could not be more excited, honored, and just raring to go to host another fabulous Power to Fly Chat and Learn event. Now, as we welcome everybody, I want to go over some quick housekeeping items, especially important if this is your first Power to Fly event. And if that's the case, then hi, welcome. We're so happy to meet you. Now, our love is no less real for all of our frequent flyers there. I absolutely love seeing all the familiar names and faces in the chat. So thank you all for joining us today as well. The big thing to know about Power to Fly events, especially our virtuals, is that they are all about participation and they're all about you. We want to make sure that as our audience members, y'all took time out of your day to be here with us live, and we want to reward you for that. So please feel free to participate. If you want, you can turn your cameras on to share your smiling, maskless faces with us safely. But y'all, there is no pressure to be Instagram perfect, okay? You can be coming from a corner office or your living room couch, like, 4-day messy bun. We don't care, all right? We just want to meet you where you are. Now, you don't have to turn on your camera if you don't want to participate. Hi, Suze, thanks for joining us. But if you do want to, feel free. If you also want to participate, but you don't want to do so with your camera, that's fine. You can add questions or comments into the group chat at any point during today's session. I'll be in there grabbing any questions that you submit in the hopes that we'll be able to raise them to our audience, to our panelists today. Now, as we're going through, please feel free to keep that chat hopping, y'all. You won't be able to come off mute, but you are absolutely encouraged to network and ask questions in the chat as well. So if you want to, head over there, let us know where you're joining from. I'm coming to you from Toledo, Ohio. This is land that belonged to the Fox, Kickapoo, and Potawatomi tribes in my area. So if you'd like to, please feel free to let us know where you're joining us from, or if you do know, whose land you're on. Now, today's session is being recorded, and what that means for all of you is you get to relax. You get to sit back, prop up your feet. You don't have to take notes, and you get to enjoy the conversation that I'm about to have with John and Delroy today. Now, as we're doing that, just know that if you miss a reference or a resource that someone listed, you can always go back and watch the recording later. So we are currently live streaming to our YouTube channel as well as to our website. Hi, YouTube. So if you do want to catch the recording, you can always find it on our YouTube channel. I'll share links in the chat for all of this as we go. But you can head over to our YouTube channel, and the link for today's recording will be posted usually within about 20 minutes of the end of the live stream. Now, if you are not a YouTube person, or maybe you just prefer to make your way in the world and live by the seat of your pants, you can. Power to Fly will email everybody that registered for today's session, whether you joined or not. And we'll give you a link to rewatch the recording when it's on our website. You can watch it on our YouTube channel. Like I said, there's a great segment of all of our archive chats are in there, but truly the motherload, everything from the beginning of Chat and Learns through now is on our website. So I very much recommend y'all check it out there and avail yourself of many of the resources we have completely for free, all for all of you. Like I said, please feel free to keep questions and comments going in the chat. If you have a question that you'd like to raise, but you want to be kept anonymous, no worries. Just DM me. You can find my name, Meg Alexander, in the dropdown. Just select that instead of sending it to everyone. Now, like I said, our guests here are here today on behalf of Helix. Helix is a fabulous partner with Power to Fly and a really interesting org working on personal genomics. So we'll give a little bit more background about Helix in just a minute. But I'm very excited to introduce you to our speakers today. So first up, we have John Corrales, who's an engineering manager. Now, as an engineering leader with over a decade of experience, John has helped organizations scale through automation and approach tasks in a way that brings joy and eliminates toil. Gosh, I can't read. John values creativity, individuality, and collaboration, and strives to foster environments that bring people together and inspire innovative thinking. John, welcome to the stage today. Is there anything else that you would think our audience should know about you?
Hey, thanks. Yeah, happy to be here. Yeah, I've been, at Helix for about 3.5 years now. It's been really great experience. I'm here in California in the Bay Area near San Francisco, and I just really love sort of talking about like these engineering topics and how do we enjoy doing the work we do. And in my free time generally, when I'm not writing code or sort of helping us find joy in our work, can usually find me at a coffee shop nerding out about some of the local coffee varieties and different processing. So it's sort of what I do in my free time.
Very cool. I love to hear it. Thank you, John. Thanks for sharing that. Joining John on stage, we're going to have his coworker, Delroy Waugh. Now, Delroy is a technical recruitment lead and is passionate and candidate-centric as a recruiter, with a proven track record of finding and hiring top talent. Now, Delroy has over 10 years of experience in the recruiting industry and has worked in a variety of industries, including biotech, technology, and ed tech. Delroy is a strong advocate for diversity and inclusion in the workplace and believes that diverse workforces are more innovative and productive. Couldn't agree more. Delroy, welcome to the stage today. We're so happy to have you. Is there anything else you think our audience should know about you?
Yeah, thanks for having me, Meg. Excited to be here for this conversation as well. I've been with Helix for about 1.5 years now. So, very excited to be here and to share some of what I've learned. For me, time management is something that is such a core part of how I manage my life right now, because I'm working, I'm going to school, I run a business, and I play a lot of volleyball, right? So I'm excited to share some techniques and talk through all of that and how I'm surviving everything in Orlando, Florida.
Excellent. Can't wait to hear all about it. All right, so I'll bring up my panelists to the stage here and get us all set up. But don't forget, y'all, if you have questions, please feel free to submit them in the chat at any point. Ooh, Sue's chiming in. We got people from California represented as well as New Jersey. Awesome. Mustafa, thank you so much for joining in as well. And thanks, Suze, for sharing. Santa Barbara, California is Chumash land. So thank you so much, Suze, for sharing that with us today. All right, so to get us started, let's talk about why time management is a critical skill. Is one of these things that I've struggled with my entire life. So clearly I'm, among friends when it comes to that. But how do you think time management really impacts an engineer's job, especially when it comes to project management?
Yeah. So, I think as engineers, generally we always have a lot on our plate, trying to come across whether it's planning for the next project, trying to understand business requirements, architecting, debugging, working with stakeholders. I mean, sort of all these things come down. And so definitely learning how to manage our time and be able to provide the right amount of attention to these individual things is super important. A lot of it comes down to just being able to chop these up and slice them up, and make sure that it doesn't become too overwhelming. I think a lot of it sort of relates to project management. Is project management ends up kind of being the tool that we can use and reference to actually get a handle on sort of all these disparate pieces and pull them together to create something that's bigger than the individual piece.
I like that. Delroy, do you agree?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think it's just generally a good skill to have, particularly for us in a distributed workforce, right? Where we have folks that are on site, folks that are hybrid, folks that are remote. How you manage your time and how you are, blocking your days off to get work done is an integral part of not just how you operate, but how the team operates. And that rolls up to how the company operates, right? And how we meet our goals. So I think regardless of where you are, specifically in engineering here, having good time management skills are going to be important for professional success, right? And kind of having that at the forefront of your mind as you're going into any jobs. How am I going to make sure that I have time to deliver against the things that I need to?
Yeah, very, very crucial skills to develop here. Okay, let's talk about some of the time management challenges that y'all have faced before. Delroy, would you like to start us?
Yeah, I mean, I think as a recruiter, my whole work is a time management challenge, right? There's so many different parts and aspects to being a recruiter. We have to meet with the candidates, we have to do the sourcing, we have admin work, we're working cross-functionally with hiring managers and other members of our team, right, to get everything done. And so for me, I look at my whole work as how do I manage my time? And it's a challenge to make sure that I'm not leaning too much into one space, right? If I spend too much time sourcing and not talking to candidates, that's going to throw off our timelines, and vice versa, right? If I spend too much time with candidates and not sourcing, then I may run out of a timeline. And so for me, I think about my work as a recruiter as a time management challenge. And it's something that I have gotten very used to, creating blocks of time in my day to make sure, and in my week to make sure that, hey, here's what I'm doing, here's what I'm working through. And I think what's really nice, like if you're a Google user, they have all these like cool new tools and functions that tell you like, hey, here's how much time you're spending in each of these spaces. So that at the end of my week, I can take a look at it and be like, okay, I'm over leveraging too much here. So let me shift some time into another space.
No, I think that's really interesting. And I like, I've heard this idea of time blocking from a lot of people, and I've tried it before to varying degrees of success. Do you find that it's most helpful when you're time blocking to like throw everything at your calendar to really like take a look at what's going on? Or do you think that could potentially kind of scare people off or give you a negative impression of what time blocking looks like and how it would help with your day?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I think I tend to lean a little bit more like, let's put everything on the calendar. And that includes focus time, that includes time that I'm working on project. Obviously, it includes times that I'm in meetings. I think the one time that probably doesn't get into there is like prep and debrief time after meetings. But I'm a fan of like, put it all on the calendar, right? Because if we're talking about time management, and if you're having a challenge with managing your time, like the first thing you need is awareness of where you're actually spending that time. And so for me, that's a really good way to get awareness of where am I spending the time, what's going in there, how much free time do I actually have in my schedule every week. So I'm like, throw it all on there and work backwards to kind of pare it back as you need to.
And there, I lost my mute button too, so don't feel bad here. No, I think that's excellent advice. And, it kind of reminds me, like, as I'm going through my day, I block off for, like my therapy sessions because I have to go drive there and come back. I block off for, stuff like these calls, but I don't block off for things like lunch. So it's like, well, now it kind of makes a little bit more sense why I get to the end of the day and I have yet to eat. So yeah. John, I want to hear from you on this. What are some of the time management challenges that you have faced in your career?
Yeah. I once had a manager sort of like early on in my career that like mentioned like managers kind of like think about time in like 1 hour blocks, and like ICs often think about time sort of like in 4 hour blocks. I think there's like a lot of sort of struggle and like understanding like the like toll of like context switching. And so one thing that like I've struggled with, and it's definitely sort of been like a learned skill and something for me to like watch out for, is just like, how do I like arrange like my calendar? How do I like protect my time to be able to focus on like a single thing? Because often, like if something comes up and context switching happens, by the time I get back to something, like the time that I had sort of like blocked off for it, it's 15 minutes, half an hour for me to get back into the groove, sort of back into like, understanding like the thing that I was deep into before I had to switch context.
Yeah, that's a great point, John. Like just the cost of context switching, right? And what that can do to throw off your whole calendar. Because you're right, it's not just like sometimes you're in the zone and it's like someone pulls you out of it, and it's like you lose that time that you've been pulled out, but then you have to ramp back up into that space too.
Well, if you think about it, our brains are not hardwired. Like there's been studies done that if you try and learn something under duress, like under stress or out of fear or whatever, like it doesn't stick, right? Our brain is just not how our brains are wired. And so it makes a ton of sense, that if you are constantly reacting to these changes, you're not going to be getting your best thought process out of that. And there's probably going to be stuff that you're either not like, it isn't sticking for you, or that you're not remembering that, would potentially help you to deal with the, whatever that new task is. But you're right. I mean, like, I feel like multitasking was the buzzword forever about like, oh yeah, I can do 17 things at once. It's great. Everything's fine. So, and now I think we're seeing a little bit more of, well, that might not be really what everybody should do task wise. So very important to focus on.
Yeah, and I was gonna say, I like, and I think it's important that like I don't think multitasking is the way to go, but there are folks that like enjoy working on different things, and I think that's fine, right? So it's not that you can't do different tasks, is that if you're trying to do all of that at the same time, like you're not going to be as effective, right? And so yeah, that's a little bit of where like the time blocking comes in, and understanding like, hey, I'm going to work on this task and then I'm going to shift to something else, and give each of those things the appropriate amount of time to get in the zone to get them done properly.
Yeah, of course. Do either of you been in a situation where time management really significantly impacted a project's success? You know, there are projects that we work on that are maybe not as time sensitive, and so maybe time management isn't quite as impactful. But you know, is it always a last minute task that includes this kind of time management, you know, as a feature?
Yeah, I think like I've definitely like worked on some projects. And I think like ultimately like something I've learned over the years is like if I can sort of think about time management earlier, like on in a project, like it really just like helps me just like be just generally like more effective and like also just like find like more of like joy in my work. Because like I also get to like scope out some more time for like things that are it's not just about like doing like the operational piece and getting like that done and like over with, being able to like scope out time for like learning, maybe like exploring, like digging a little deeper into like a specific like aspect of something that seems interesting to me, has really like helped me lean into it and actually like create like a better product like at the end, right? Because at that point, like I understand it better. I was able to spend more time with it and it wasn't sort of me just like rushing to get something done.
That's a good point. Yeah. Delroy, how about you? Like, where have you had any projects where your time management was really like a game changer for the, you know, for the task?
Yeah, I mean, I think what I'll share is that kind of like early in my career, and even sometimes now, like I have a little bit of a dark side where I love to jump into new things and I'll just like get a project and I get real excited and I dive right in, right? And I sometimes like you don't spend that time, like John was saying upfront, like thinking about, okay, like how long is this going to take to execute? How much work is it going to take? How much research is it going to need? And so I think this was my pitfall a lot of the times early in my career, where it's like you want to prove that you can do things, you want to prove that you can get things done. You're thinking, hey, the more volume of things I get out, the better. But I think for me, what I've learned is that like taking that extra day or two to really map things out and have a plan and think about time management improves the quality of your work. And that alone is going to give you kind of more visibility in your organization than if you're just kind of pumping out volumes of work that isn't as high quality. And so like that's just kind of like a general answer, but like that's a little bit of how I think about how it can impact the success of a project.
Yeah. And as I'm listening to you, John, I was really connecting with what you had said about kind of tackling the timeline to kind of get your bearings on a project. Because it sounds like, you know, the different projects and the different products that y'all work on could change pretty drastically. So time is in effect kind of the one variable that doesn't really change, you know. So if you do have an idea of the timeline, at least that you're looking at, then from there, then you can break it down into like, okay, well, what needs to happen from A to B? What does that mean? This can't be done before this happens, you know. So I think that makes a ton of sense, you know. It really does kind of clarify that at least this is in work that it can feel very intangible. It is like a really nice way to be like, okay, concrete, this many hours are going to pass. What are we going to do over that length of time? I like that. Okay, let's talk about prioritizing. So when it comes to, you know, being able to manage your time, knowing what you have on your plate is just as important, if not a little bit less so, than knowing the importance of those tasks. What strategies do you all recommend for engineers to make sure that they're prioritizing those tasks effectively? Delroy, you want to start us?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, this one comes down to like, regardless of where you are in the professional setting, it's like making sure you understand the needs of the team and the business, right? And that should be for you coming from your manager, your supervisor, your boss, whoever that person is. And so I think if you're having questions about which tasks should I prioritize, how do I move through this work if there's not enough time to get it all done, my North Star is I'm reaching out to my boss, right? I'm reaching out to my manager, Andrea. I see her in the chat, hey, Andrea. And I'm letting her know, hey, here's the things that are on my plate. I need some help prioritizing this. What are the things that we need to focus on? And we've recently had conversations about prioritizing, right? Like we're working on a specific project, and that means other things need to get shifted. And so having that conversation whenever I'm feeling stuck or unsure of where to shift things is always something that gives me the certainty that I need to move forward. Because at the end of the day, my boss's expectations of me will color how I deliver my work. And so I always want to make sure that we're on the same page about what are the things that I'm prioritizing.
John, do you agree with this? Is this something you've also experienced?
Yeah, definitely. I think, to Delroy's point, like, oh, so much about this is just like having like context and being able to like identify like what are the important goals. It's really easy like in an organization to realize that like the stuff that you're working on, is sort of like you're sort of like in like a bubble sometimes. There's a lot going on in bigger organizations, like stuff sort of like happening all over the place. And it's impossible for any like one person to have context around like what's happening everywhere. And so, if that's talking to like your manager, your like product manager, like, somebody else like on the team whose like job is, focused on sort of like understanding like the different like business initiatives and sort of like what's happening in various parts of the business, like having those conversations with people and understanding like that they're having conversations with like other stakeholders. And, I think really just having it be a collaborative effort and knowing that like everyone's kind of like working towards the success of the business and, coming together and having these conversations is really like the only way for us to really break down like what is like the most important thing for us to be focusing on.
Yeah. And I think, you made Delroy, you made a good point when you were answering too, where you said like, what you'll do is you'll take a look at, what you have on your plate and then bring it to your manager and say, hey, like, here's what I'm looking at. And that kind of makes me think of, all the times that I've brought stuff to my manager and that idea of kind of coming proactively, like, hey, here's everything on my plate. And I've even gone so far as like, here's what the order of what I'm tackling things right now. But does this track with where you want me to spend my time? Because if you make it more of a conversation of, hey, is this how you want me to prioritize versus what should I do first? One of them seems a lot more proactive and like somebody who doesn't need everything spoon fed to them. So yeah, I think you both make really good points as to like how this can really impact the project in ways that you maybe wouldn't necessarily think of to start with. Let's see. Let's talk about kind of the opposite end of this. So if you are looking at your task list and you're trying to figure out how to deprioritize tasks, are there any like specific ways y'all utilize to do this more effectively in your day-to-day? John, do you want to start us?
Yeah, I think, a lot of this still sort of like comes back to communication. And I think like every organization's different. Every, team has like a different like set of people, different stakeholders. But at the end of the day, like there's always like this human component of like trying to like understand like, who needs what, where, why, and like how does that like affect like other parts of like the business. And so I think so much of, deprioritizing like also comes down to just like having like communication and like just letting people know like, hey, like, if you find something that you think like should be like deprioritized because like something else seems more urgent, have those conversations like with stakeholders, let them know, just be open. And I think it really just allows for more conversation. And it's really never like a decision that like you need to be making like on your own. There's always sort of like a support system and people around you that can help give input.
Do you agree, Delroy?
Yeah, I mean, I think like to John's point, it goes back to like the communication, right? I think for me, once I understand what those priorities are, right, I'm checking in with my manager and understanding, hey, these are the things that I need to prioritize right now. I think the flow of that is it also helps me to deprioritize, right? Because if I'm having a conversation, it's like, hey, we actually need to get folks in the top of our recruitment pipeline, and that is our priority for the week. Then like automatically that means, well, maybe some of my admin work that I would have done like right on time is getting pushed back just a little bit more so that I can build that top of the funnel. And so I think once you understand what the priorities are, it may allow you to make some decisions about like, what are the things in my day-to-day that I can deprioritize to make sure that I'm hitting this goal that my team needs me to hit. And I think, again, like if you're uncertain about that or you're feeling kind of icky, like I'm a fan, and so is John, of just checking in and being like, hey, here's what I'm thinking. Here's what my plan for the week looks like. Does this align with the priorities that we have for the team? I don't think there's going to be a manager that is going to be upset at you for reaching out with that. And if they are, then you have a bad manager.
Oh, I'm telling you, the ways to tell a bad manager, they're just plentiful, right? Because we're all bad in our own terrible ways. So I think that's wonderful. Okay. All right, let's keep moving down our questions list. Let's see. Oh, we did have one from the channel, or from the audience that I wanted to talk about. Kanika had asked, how did you manage your time during the pandemic? That was the toughest time for me to manage because of an excessive workload and taking care of other chores too. So let's talk about this. Did y'all work remotely during the pandemic? And if so, was that different from your normal workflow? How did that change what your day-to-day was like? John, you've been nodding a lot. You want to start?
Yeah. Yeah, I think the pandemic hit us all, by surprise, and sort of changed the world that like we live in and how we, live our day-to-day lives and how we approach work. But yeah, it was definitely an intense time, especially like I was at Helix. I had actually just started at Helix right as the pandemic had started. And so it was sort of like this big, sort of transition of like, oh, like in office, all of a sudden, like at home, like, what does that mean? How do we like communicate? How, what does it mean for the business? Helix, we actually took the time and actually like, found an opportunity for us to help, support, and like we pivoted and we did like COVID testing. We're able to like lean in there and sort of be part of like that initiative. So it was really useful. Like it was an incredibly like busy time. That's definitely true. But sort of being able to like connect with the stuff that we were working on was really helpful for me, and being able to understand like the mission and know that like we were adding good, to the world by helping with this like global pandemic. So I think, that was a little bit of a unique thing like at Helix, but overall, like it was important just to like find like that balance like in life too. I think being able to understand like what being home meant all the time and how to like create that relationship with work. It was all, definitely it's sort of like a wild time, but I think it helped me like understand what like boundaries are and like how to like add those into my life too.
Right. Setting them is one thing, but like respecting them yourself is absolutely, for me, that's the huge like struggle there. Delroy, you're smiling entirely too much. What does this look like for you? Like, was there a huge change for your day-to-day during COVID? Did you work remotely before this? What did that look like for you?
Yeah, so I had the benefit of being in a role at the time that was hybrid. So I was already kind of going into the office when I needed to. And so it wasn't too much of a shift for me. I did deal with some furlough. I was furloughed for about 8 months or so during the early parts of the pandemic. And so that also really helped with time management, right? Because now I have like all this time to pour into kind of personal projects. But then I started a new role at an organization kind of like midway through. And that was like a little jolting, right? Going from a space where I'd been furloughed and like I had this kind of hybrid setup, going into a fully remote space, working with a team that was mostly in a different country. And also my first experience kind of working across multiple time zones. So that was a little bit of like figuring out how to show up in that space, and like really had to change the way I thought about what engagement looked like. I think to John's point, when like Helix is doing the shift, it's like, what does it look like to be engaged in a world where you're not going into an office every day, where you're not having kind of like the water cooler talk? And as a leader at the time, like how do I build that engagement with my team, within my team, particularly when I was coming into a new space? And it was just like a lot of intentionality. I feel like during the pandemic and even after, like that's what we're learning in this distributed workforce, that it takes a lot of intentionality, not just to like build engagement, but to also like manage your time properly and set priorities properly for work.
Yeah, of course. I had the luxury of going remote the year before the pandemic. So I had I was in a position where I'd already been working from home for a year. So I'd already hit that weird first like road bump of, oh, it's 7:30 at night and I'm still working because the office is there. So sure. Plus like, Powerfly's world distributed as well. So working across time zones, it was really easy to fall into that. And plus, again, I also had the luxury of like planning for this, right? I knew when I was interviewing that this was going to be a remote role and it was going to be a challenge for me because I'd never worked remotely before. So I got, I had the luxury of looking up like, tips and tricks on how to do this. So I knew to like build in a commute, like a faux commute for my day, because like, mental health wise, even if that's not what you're thinking about on your commute, you are mentally preparing yourself for the day. And I wasn't doing that anymore. So like all kinds of stuff like that, how to budget your time, how to do chores. Like, one of the things I read said, don't do chores for the first month. Don't do anything at the house that you couldn't do if you were at the office. So like, I didn't do laundry, I didn't do anything else, but like for 3 or 4 months in, I was multitasking like a fiend, turn on the dishwasher before I start my chat. Once it's done, I'll go empty it. Then I'll go walk the dogs. Then you know what I mean? Like you get into that groove. But so many people that went with the pandemic didn't have that luxury. And so, Delroy, to your point, it is more intentionality that's needed, right? Because it's slightly different than a lot of the ways that we were used to kind of defaulting to in-person interactions to take care of a lot of stuff organically. But I think what we're also seeing is that like now that we're hopefully past the like panic phase of the pandemic and we're more into, oh, okay, what might another winter with COVID look like? We are at that point where we can say like, okay, yeah, here's what I need to budget time wise. Here's what I, where I can expect this to take longer, or where I need to like, be more realistic about what my timeline is going to look like. So y'all, if you have additional like tips and stuff here, please feel free to share. We also got the same-ish sort of question, and I wanted to see if we could address it with y'all. Let's see. This person had asked, where did it go? Oh no, I'm so sorry, y'all. There it is. Caroline had asked if you have any tips on how to manage your mind to focus or refocus on tasks if you're dealing with ADHD. Do either of you deal with ADHD? Delroy, same with me? Yeah. All right, Delroy, what do you think? This person said that they use things like the Pomodoro method. It still feels like a challenge to focus for that long. For those of you that aren't familiar, Pomodoro is it refers to tomatoes. I can't remember why, but it's a 20-minute timer. Basically, all of your tasks, like you get a 20-minute window. What do you do to work around your ADHD?
Yeah, so one, I have a lot of fidget toys. This one right now is my favorite. It's from Helix. I've rubbed off the Helix emblem that was on it. So I have a lot of fidget toys at my desk. I'm also, I noticed during the pandemic, and I guess that when I go to coffee shops, or even when I was like showing up in the office, one of the things that I liked about working in that space was that there were just kind of other voices around, right? So I am a big fan of kind of like body doubling or parallel play. And so when I can't have someone else to do that, I just turn the TV on, I put on my favorite sitcom, and I just let them talk in the background. And that really, really helps me stay focused, because it's almost like I have something to ignore. So it allows me to focus on the thing that I need to do. I've never heard of the Pomodoro method, but I generally try to keep my blocks of work to 2 hours, because I know that like at that point, like I'm either going to get bored or tired, or I'm going to lose attention. So I try to keep my blocks of work and my focus times at 2 hours. And I just like do 2 hours worth of work. Same with my meetings. I'll try to like have my meetings be in 2-hour blocks as much as possible. But those are some of the things that I like. I also love the lo-fi hip hop station on YouTube. That's a nice getting my day started one. But it's the fidget toys, the parallel player, body doubling if I can, or TV as company is what I call it, and those really help.
I like that. The body doubling is huge. Since I live and work remotely, my husband's home like in the evenings, but not like all day long. So I do the body doubling thing. I'll call a friend and like have them sit on the phone with me while we both work. I have another friend that works remotely. So that's a really good one for me too. John, do you do anything along these lines? Even if you are not within the neurodivergent community, we all struggle, I think, with focus sometimes.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I appreciate your guys' like tips there. It's something that I've also like, I've wondered about myself, and I've been a little bit in the journey of like getting diagnosed. So like I'm, a little bit in that like exploring or just like understanding myself stage right now. But yeah, I think that there's, I don't know. I've had like a lot of like close friends and like mentors who like also have like ADHD and like have, dealt with like working in this space. And one thing that like I've, think I can have taken away from them and sort of like learned from them and tried to like apply to myself too, is to like be okay. Like don't like punish myself for the times when like it's, I find things becoming like more difficult or a certain area, and like giving myself space to sort of like dive into those like interesting things that may like catch my attention in the moment, and like making sure to like carve out space for that, and like, I don't know, love myself, I guess, for however I work.
that. I struggle with this too. I mean, just yesterday I was having a really weird point of the day of like, well, I haven't done enough to like deserve a rest. And it was just like, no, 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 no. You don't earn rest. Rest is a given. People need it. It's what our brains need. So let's do this. And I think you're right. I mean, a lot of us struggle with attention issues for whatever reason. I try to gamify that one's, I'm constantly chasing the dopamine. So if I can gamify something, like I'll set my 20-minute Pomodoro timer, but I'll be like, okay, how fast can I get this done in? Because if I can get it done fast, then I can have the extra 15 minutes and I can have my silly little treat, like read a chapter of my book or, have a fistful of popcorn or, whatever my small treat is at that point. So if y'all have other suggestions, please share. We'd love to hear them in the chat.
Meg, I really like when you talked about, like calling someone or jumping on a virtual chat with them as like a body doubling space. Like I also do that a lot. And I think a lot of the times we think about body doubling and parallel playing, it's like has to be in person. I actually find it as like a really good tool to like engage with someone else in a workforce, right? Because you could reach out to someone who you want to get to know and be like, hey, do you want to just do some silent work together? You spend the first 15 minutes like catching up and talking, and then you're just kind of muted with someone else on the screen. So I think that's like a really good way to kind of get some engagement from your team. The other thing that comes to mind with my ADHD is like, at least for me, like I can get lost in trying to find a faster way to do something, right? Yeah. And so I have to, I schedule time during my week, like some of my focus time is just like tinkering time, right? Where I'm tinkering with my work. Like, is there a faster way to do this? Is there a better way to do this? That way I'm not spending too much time. This is a time management skill for me, right? I'm not spending too much time tinkering and not enough time kind of executing. But I know that tinkering is something that I need to do. So I make sure that I have time to kind of play at work. And that also makes me like a more productive employee.
I like that. I very much like building in the time to mess with the settings. I think that is really, I can think like right now, I can think of like 3 tasks where I've been like, there has to be an easier way to do this. Let me follow a Google click hole. And 3 days later, I will remember that I never finished that spreadsheet. Like it, okay. All right, let's pivot a little bit and talk a little bit about workload. One person wrote in saying, I encounter early or mid-career engineers who grapple with a heavy workload. What guidance would you offer them regarding establishing a point to conclude their work for the day or the week? So let's talk about it. How do you know when to say quit for the day? And do you think this is more difficult the further along you get in your career? Delroy, you want to start?
If I'm being honest, I'm really bad at this. And maybe it's because of like the season of life that I'm in right now, right? Like I feel like I have a lot of energy, I have a lot of goals, and I'm kind of like in a hustle mode. And I think one of the benefits of working in an organization that allows me to create the kind of life work balance that I want is that like I can make the decision about like when it is too much, as long as I'm meeting those expectations of my boss. And so I'm going to be honest, I'm really bad for this one because like there are moments where I'll sit down and I'm just like, hey, I'm in the mood to do some sourcing and it's 8 o'clock and my brain is firing and I'll jump in and do some work, right? But that's a boundary that I've set for myself. But yeah, like so I'm gonna throw this one to John.
Cool. Yeah, I totally get that too. I definitely like go through, I feel like it's sort of a roller coaster for me sometimes when like, I might be in like those like grind, like hustle mode where like I really just like want to, just super interested in the current task and really just like want to like dig in and work on it. But there's definitely like those other times when it's just like there's stuff happening in life. Like, my sister had a baby like last year. And so I want to spend more time with the family and like get to know my nephew and stuff. And so being able to like carve out time for like the weekends and like after work hours is like also like really important. I think like I've noticed for me that, we were talking a little bit about like context switching and like the cost that has sort of like in between meetings. I think like there's another aspect to like context switching, which is switching like out of work mode into life mode. And I think like, being able to be like intentional about that and like aware of that. So like for Friday afternoons, for example, like we'll try not to schedule like any like big important like planning meetings, like, that can wait until like Monday when like I'm more like focused on like what's happening for the rest of the week. Instead, I might think of Fridays more as like a time to like wind down. What are the things that I can like close out, like pull requests that like I can like review that, are more about like closing things out and sort of like putting my mind like at rest and closing out sort of like open threads for the week and sort of like preparing for the weekend in that regard.
I like that. Truly, y'all, when I was talking about like building commutes into my day, the end of day commute was honestly the most important, truly. Because otherwise it'd be 8:30 at night and I'd still be in my office because what else? I don't have kids. There's nothing else for us to do. It's totally fine. So, it really does it really hammered home for me the fact that I needed to set my own boundaries and that no one was going to respect those boundaries if I didn't respect those boundaries. So like I throw in stuff like if I have a workout class and that's how I'm hard ending my day, because I usually try and build in things like that. So it's like, oh, I can't push it back by 5 minutes because I'm gonna, they're already gonna be started with the, the heavy bag workout, and Lauren's gonna make me feel silly when I come in late. So, build in those kinds of things, but absolutely putting space for them on my calendar. I block out time on my calendar for my therapy appointments. And even when I was doing telehealth, I still blocked out an extra 15 minutes on the front and 15 minutes on the end to kind of simulate that commute. So to simulate the idea of like, okay, I'm going and I'm preparing to do blah, blah, blah. And then working from home on the weekends, like on Friday nights, I would block out 30 minutes at like the end of my day to go through my inbox and go through my Slack messages and whatever. And so that way I felt like I was done for the week. Now, I don't always do this. It's gotten like, I've gotten like kind of dicey about it from like freelancing, but this worked pretty well. And it builds in those guardrails so that not only are you actually respecting your time and your boundaries, but like you're not losing sight of them. So, something that hopefully maybe could help other people as well. All right, let's talk about the kind of dichotomy of professional growth and then personal growth. I think a lot of engineers especially kind of struggle with this because at a certain point you start having to delegate tasks to other team members. So I want to know, has there ever been a point where y'all felt like you had to strike that balance between I want to keep growing and like I want my skills to grow, but also I'm now going to have to like kind of hand work off elsewhere? Have y'all fought with this at all, or has it been something that you've dealt with in your career?
Yeah, definitely. It's been especially sort of like as I made like the transition from, from like an IC to like an engineering manager, sort of like understanding also just like the art of like delegation and like learning how to like delegate itself is a real skill. And it is something that I really wish like earlier in my career I would have like focused on a bit more of like how do I like, break down tasks, be able to like articulate them and understand like where are there pieces that I can also like share with like a teammate and also work with somebody. I think like there's, it's so important to just like understand like what is important to you and like your career path and like work with like your manager to be able to like know that like, hey, like if this project comes up and it's super exciting to you and you think it's like sort of something you want to work on, like see if you can carve out time to like dedicate and like focus on that. But also like, as you grow in your career, there's going to be more and more opportunities that are like similar. So like if you miss one, like it's also not the end of the world, but there could be, the skill of like learning how to sort of like take it on as more like a lead almost and like understand like the task and be able to hand out pieces to other parts of the team.
Do you think that this is something that most people struggle with in their careers, or do you think it might be unique to people that are pursuing potentially the management track?
Yeah, I think that's something like everybody struggles with, and I think it sort of relates a lot to just understanding like how much we can take on. Sometimes like we're in that like, oh, I want to like take on everything and like just like get all the things done, and that can also just like lead to burnout and like other things when you sort of like are trying to do everything. And so I guess like understanding like boundaries, your own personal health, what you're capable of, and also kind of like relating that back to like with your personal goals and like what are the business goals and sort of like understanding these different factors and how they relate to each other.
Yeah. All right. Delroy, for you, what has it been like for you to start delegating tasks to teammates? Like, how do you think that has impacted your career development?
Yeah, I think where I'm at now, it's an interesting question to think about, and because like our team is small, right? There's four of us on the team, and so when we're thinking about like how do we delegate tasks to others, there's not a lot of space to kind of push those tasks around, and I think it becomes more of understanding like where are team strengths, and where are where on the team are folks excited by a particular type of work, right? And is there space for me to say, hey, like I have this volume of work this week that doesn't feel great, but I know this person really enjoys this. Let me bring them in to kind of help with the work, right? So it feels less like delegating and more kind of like load sharing in the space that I'm in right now, which I think is also like just as important, right? It's like recognizing, to John's point, like when there's too much, when you're feeling overwhelmed, and who on your team can help you kind of alleviate that burden in the short term, if not over the long term. So I think it's an important skill to have, like kind of whichever lens you look at it through. But in the past, it's certainly been something that I've struggled with as a leader. I think there's the need to prove yourself, right? At least that's what it was for me, like early in the career, even at my last role. Like there's this need to prove that you can get things done. And sometimes when you do that, like you end up with a lot of things on your plate. And you also take opportunities away from your team, particularly if you're a manager, to show the skills and abilities that they have. I think it also really hurts with resource allocation, right? Because if you're a manager on a team and you're kind of hoarding all the work and you're not delegating it properly, then you're actually not doing the job you're meant to do as a manager, right? And you're under resourcing your organization by taking utility away from your team. And so I think it's an important skill to nurture like as early as possible in your career. To John's point, you don't have to be a manager to learn how to delegate and load share and have those conversations about, hey, it feels like a lot. How do I shift out of this? Because it'll be useful like as you level up.
Yeah. No, I very much love what you had said about, if you're not delegating to your team, you are robbing them of chances to prove their skills. Like, because for me, delegating is always, okay, I don't have time to do this, so I need you to do this for me. And for my brain, that's not, that doesn't compute, right? I can't be the person handing tasks to other people. I can't be the person that's making more work for someone else. So I very much love this idea of no, you have to delegate, because if you're not, you are stealing opportunities from them to be able to show what kind of skills they have and what kind of support they can offer. Because it might not just be for you, you know what I mean? Like they might be doing this and like utilizing and showing off those like kind of task completion skills for you, but you're not going to be their only manager they've ever had in their entire lives. So I think it is really important that you kind of allow people to have these other opportunities to shine. Oof, Delroy, I learned something new on every single one of these. 4 years later, I still learned something new. That's my thing for today. Thank you, Delroy. Thank you for that. Okay, let's talk about some of the specific tools that y'all utilize to improve your time management skills. This person wrote in saying, I'm a fan of using OneNote for all of my communications and tracking. I honestly used to use this, and then ADHD, it fell off, I fell off the wagon with keeping up with it. But what kind of things do y'all use other than, a basic timekeeping stopwatch on your phone? Delroy, how about you?
I was trying to see if I could grab them, but they're a little over there. I have like 4 different notebooks for each aspect of my life, like work, school, business, play, that I write things down in religiously. I am, as I mentioned earlier, super calendared. Everything goes on the calendar. I have a booking link that I like. Friends are like, hey, you want to hang out? I'm like, if you can find some time. And at first, people were like very upset about it. They were like, oh, I just want to grab 30 minutes with you and you send me your booking calendar. And I was like, yeah, but like otherwise we're going to be going back and forth for 10 text messages trying to figure out when we're both available. Like if you really want to talk, grab some time, right? So
it makes me so happy.
I think like sometimes we also underestimate the power of this thing, right? Oh, you can't see it. Like if you have a smartphone, it's basically a virtual assistant. I talk to my phone so much, also because of the ADHD. like something pops up and I'm like, hey, remind me to do this, remind me to check this, right?
Yeah.
So I'm a big fan of taking notes, writing things down, putting everything on the calendar, setting reminders, to kind of help me like get through that. So, and I feel like these are all things that we have access to through the work that we're doing, for the most part.
Yeah. John, how about you? Are there any specific tools that you use?
Yeah, I think like, I've keeping track of all the things has always been like really, really difficult. So I'm definitely like on the like keep a lot of like notes, train. I think I'm a sort of like an older school like tech nerd, I guess. So I use like Vim a lot and like have used like Emacs, and there's certain like text editors that are sort of wrapped around like the idea. Like Emacs has like org mode, it's called, and like there's some newer editors like Obsidian or like Logseq that like sort of try to create connections between like various notes. So you end up having sort of like this like map. And personally, like whenever I try and like remember something, like that works super well for me. It's just like, oh, like there's a little bit of context here that kind of connects to this, that connects to this other thing over here. And so like creating sort of like this chain and like map of, all the different pieces and how they relate to each other, really just like helps me stay focused and understand like context between like the various pieces.
Yeah, I like that.
I'm gonna
I
have
don't
to
know if
check
y'all
that out.
use, if you don't use Slack at your workplaces, it might be a little bit more difficult, but like we use Slack and I have the like me to myself thread, like a little direct message thread. And I use that for reminders as well. So like
Yeah.
I'll be out, and I'll get a call from one of the Power to Fly people. Hey, can you cover my chat next week? And yeah, I'll be like, can you send me the invite on that so I don't forget? But then I will also, I'll go in and send myself a Slack message because like I don't have my calendar editable on my phone, at least not easily. So I'll go in, I'll send myself a Slack message and just remember, like bill for the time for that call, and then make sure that this is on the calendar. So yeah, let your smartphones, let your devices work for you. Like absolutely offload the little small tasks we can.
Yeah. John, I may
All
have
right.
to check out that tool you mentioned, because sometimes when I'm looking for like have 4 notebooks and I'm like, okay, where did I put
Yeah.
these thoughts? I'm like stressing through all of them. So I'll check that out.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
All right, I have one last question for each of you. We're going to treat this kind of like a popcorn round here. Where did it go? Specific tools. Oh, okay. So, how do you recommend going about discussing it with your manager when a task is exceeding the initially estimated time frame? So let's talk about this. You've got a task, you thought you knew how long it was going to take. Now that's not going to fit. How should people talk about this when they're trying to approach their manager about this? John, you want to go first?
Yeah, I think like, of course, I think like the natural answer is just sort of like the earlier, the better. Like the earlier you can sort of give this context, like it just sort of like helps provide like awareness to everybody. But ultimately, like, I just think just like being honest, being open, helping like people, like help your manager like understand, a good manager is there to like be your advocate. They want you to be successful. They want to like help you succeed. And they can be there to help you like break down things, help provide like extra resources, maybe find somebody else to like pivot over to help pair with you on the project to get something like done quicker. Or if there's other blockers that are just like stopping there from being progress on it, like they're there to advocate to you, to like stakeholders, and like to help them protect you from any of the other things that might come downstream. So yeah, I think just like it's okay to be vulnerable. There's no shame in like there being blockers or things slowing you down. Just honesty.
Delroy, how about you? What do you think is the way to like bring this conversation up?
Yeah, I mean, I'll plus one everything John said. I think, for me, I'm always like trying to think through like what the solution looks like also. And so, but I think the most important thing is like the earlier the better. The sooner you realize things are going off the rail, you bring that to your manager and you say, hey, here's what I've been doing. Here are the results. Here's what I think. Here's how I think we can move forward. Here's what this means for the timeline, right? Because I think if you're having that conversation, then it makes it easier for everyone to kind of have that way forward. And it also kind of demonstrates that you're thinking, that you have like a solution-oriented mindset towards this, right? Like I know something is wrong. I've thought about a solution. I want to discuss it with you. I think those type of conversations with your managers are always going to be more productive than like, hey, something's wrong. And I don't know what to do. And it's okay if you need to have those, but I'd say always try to, sit and think like, can I make a plan or a way forward for this on my own that I can discuss? And if the answer is yes, great. If it's no, also great. Still flag it. But that'd be the only thing I would add.
I like that. And then just to put it out there for all my fellow neurodivergent people out there, most of you know what it's like to go through kind of the apology tour, as I refer to it. So like the wheels fell off at some point or another. For me, it's usually depression. And so now I've kind of got my apology tour to go through of, I'm sorry I didn't get back to you. I'm sorry I didn't get that thing done on time. And as much as we joke about this because you got to laugh or you'll cry sometimes, right? But I think it is also important that we like kind of acknowledge if you are, within the neurodivergent family, if you have ADHD and this like impacts your time management, it's okay. And I feel like people with ADHD apologize a lot of the time. And like, that's okay. And it's fine to give context, but like, don't feel like you have to apologize for like who you are as a person. I get into that loop a lot. Don't do that. I don't want that for all of you. But yeah, I mean, like, giving someone context, hey, you know what? I'm having a really hard time with my executive dysfunction today. I am trying really hard to stay on this task. I thought it would take me an hour. Here I am 3 hours later and it's still not done. I'm sorry, this is what I'm dealing with. Like, you don't need to apologize for who you are as a person, but just give the person context of this is what I'm dealing with. I'm not just like, tra-la-la, ignoring you, head in the clouds, don't care what's going on. So just a thought for y'all.
Meg,
Okay.
one of the interesting things
yeah.
I saw is about like reframe, because I struggle with that too. Is like, how do you reframe that like I'm sorry into like gratitude? So like I'm sorry for wasting your time becomes thanks for your patience as I worked through this thing, right? And I think that alone, just like mentally for you, puts you in a better space. If you're constantly feeling like you have to apologize, how can you turn it into gratitude for the other person for giving you this space and grace to figure out what was going on and come back to the table?
Yes, Delroy, coming in clutch. Loving this. Okay. All right. We have about 3 minutes left. I want to make sure we end on time for everyone. These are some questions that we had asked to John and Delroy prior to today's session. So we asked them some questions about Helix. Their culture they described as harmonizing. Favorite part about working at Helix is the ability to create that life-work balance. Very, very awesome. I want to talk about your top tip for someone who's interviewing. Do you think this is Helix specific, or do you think this works no matter where you're applying?
I think it works no matter where you're applying. And I think specifically with engineers, sometimes it's the gap that we see, right? It's like, how are you talking about your work? How are you talking about the ownership that you had? Like, what did you do? What was your contribution? And how did that contribution have an impact on your team and the business or the customer? Like, what does it mean? And so I always, try to prep folks for interviews, or you think about like the STAR method, which is like out there. It's like, what was the situation? What task were you assigned? What did you actually do? What was the result? And what was your reflection, or what did you learn, right? And I think if you're thinking about telling stories in that way, it becomes more effective, and it allows folks to really see the breadth of the work that you've done, rather than just saying, I coded this thing. Well, you take me through that story and end with that impact, and now I'm like, oh wow, this person has such ownership of their work and they think about it in such a good way, and that's going to go a long way in an interview process. So that's my tip for everyone across the board, engineering, anywhere you're going.
John, do you have anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think Delroy, just really covered that like really well. I think telling stories is a way that we naturally, like as people, as humans, like connect and like relay information to each other. So I think storytelling is a great way to also just like you show off like who you are when you're trying to like present that to an interviewer.
Excellent. Couldn't agree more. All right, y'all, that's going to bring us to the end of time today. But I just want to say a huge thank you to Delroy and John. Thanks to Helix for lending you to us for the afternoon. But it's really been wonderful to get to know both of you and learn from both of you. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Meg. This is great.
All right, to all of our audience members, thank you again for coming today. Today's event was really fun and engaging. I hope that y'all enjoyed it as much as I did. If this was your first Power to Fly event, I really sincerely hope it will not be your last. And if this was your millionth, we cannot wait to see you again on another event soon. Have a safe, happy, healthy rest of your weekend, y'all. Bye.
Wait a minute, I got joy in my spirit. I got money in my pocket and some seasoning for my chicken. Why am I stressing? Won't even address it. Leave my problems on my nightstand. Worries on my dresser. See, now there's a bigger